Ashwin, can you tell us, how do you see this World Cup 2023?
I think firstly, Dr. Nick, thank you for the invitation, and to everybody here, thank you so much for your presence. You know, it is quite humbling. You know, I was reminded on my way here about just how much rugby and sport in general has meant for us as South Africans, in nation building in particular. But I think, you know, when we talk rugby, you talk about, they say there's three things in South Africa. There's God, Nelson Mandela, and rugby. So you can imagine to be able to participate in a sport that really, it occupies the public discourse. Everywhere you go, rugby is a sport that's loved by South Africans in a way that other sports have tried to capture the heart and attention of the nation, but rugby has actually succeeded in that. So for me to be here this evening and you know, Brand SA, to accept this is a representative of an institution that have successfully managed to capture the attention of the nation. I think it's such an enormous responsibility, and that's what it means being a Springbok. It's actually taking on that responsibility. And so when we talk about what's going to happen this weekend, I have been saying from the opening of the World Cup, and there's a nice article by Ian Foster, the New Zealand coach, where after they've lost to us in August, 35 points, you know, record loss to South Africa, he said he felt like it was the best thing that could have happened to the All Blacks at that point in time. It was a week before the World Cup started, or 2 weeks before the World Cup started, and he wanted to take all the attention off the team and all the, you know, when you're the All Blacks and when you're the Springboks, there's always an expectation to be in the finals. So he wanted to take that away from his team, and he has successfully done that. And then they came and they played the opening game on the 8th of September. So this year's World Cup is an interesting one because the opening was on the 8th of September. That just so happens to be the day of my birth as well. So thank you. So then the All Blacks lost. Now you can imagine for me, I have played in France, so to see the All Blacks lose in the opening game against the French, it was just the perfect birthday present that I could have asked for. So I think to put the seal on it, this coming weekend, the only person or the only thing that's still missing is Madiba's presence at the World Cup. But I saw, you know, our president after the semis, he had a national meeting, a family meeting, and he did indicate that we'll have a public holiday potentially. He's had all the requests. So I think we've got like, what's it, 62 million or is it 57 million, but we've got millions of South Africans saying, Mr. President, please can we get off on Monday? That's right. So we will win it. We're going to take it, Dr. Nick. I think the All Blacks will be more surprised if they win it than what everyone else will be.
Thank you. Now, Ashwin, you're widely regarded as a #1 Bokke fan. And we have a number of questions from the audience. And since the sponsors enabled this event, you have the first opportunity. So if you want to raise your hand, I'm looking at Nedbank, I'm looking at FNB.
We are very happy to have you as part of the Brand South Africa Play Your Part Ambassador family, first of all. So welcome home. The question I would like to ask you, obviously you've had very critical first-hand experience in being part of generating that positive, electrifying, unifying energy among South Africans, you know, which builds pride. What do you think, in your view, we need to do in order, one, to be able to sustain that energy beyond the actual trophy tour, which we will have? I support the statement. Secondly, how can we replicate or duplicate that kind of energy in other sectors? You know, the country is good at many things, sport being one of them. You have been able to generate that energy through rugby, but we would like to duplicate it in other areas where the country is also good at, so that we can, you know, keep up the positive energy and the social cohesion.
Thank you very much for that question. I think, let me start off and answering it in a way that so from the perspective of the Springboks, for as long as I can remember, has always been, it has been something that you aspire towards. So every player, when you grow up in South Africa and you're a rugby player, you dream of playing for the Springboks. And secondly, you're playing for the Springboks, or you're dreaming of playing for the Springboks against the All Blacks. So that is an aspirational thing. And then I think out of all the number of rugby players across the country, the ones that ends up making it is so little, minute in the globular scheme of things, that everyone that plays the game recognizes and understands what an accomplishment it is. And then those that does not play rugby understands what it takes to achieve that. So what you have there is you have good in and good out. It's not garbage in, garbage out. So what do I mean by that? The way you train, the way you carry yourself, the way you represent your jersey, the camaraderie in the team, all of this is fundamentals that makes up a team. With the Springboks, it's so much more because it is a legacy it's a legacy that have sustained itself for so long, and the legacy have been evolving. And if we look at 1995, there was Chester Williams, who was the only black player in the team, the late Chester Williams. Yes, we can actually, may his soul rest in peace. And Chester Williams, during that team, was sort of, he was the darling of the team. And when he was injured and didn't play, and then he came back and he scored 4 tries. So there was one player of color in the team. The next World Cup, 99, it was Brayton Paulse, who was then the dominant player. There was one player of color in the team. 2003, we lost in the quarterfinals. I was the one non-white player in the team. So for 3 World Cups, we basically had where there was one player of color in the team playing in the starting lineup. 2007, we had J.P. Peterson and Brian Abana in the team. So we've gone from 1-1-1 to now 2 in the team. 2011 onwards, if you ask anybody today, name the number of black players in the team, you won't be able to at a drop of a hat because there's so many. It's that you don't distinguish on the basis of color. So when we talk about energy, energy is the ability to maintain your focus, to maintain your drive when it's going tough. Now imagine we're talking about from 1995 to 2023. Look at the amount of time that have lapsed. Look at how the world, we've had COVID, we've had wars in Iraq, we've had wars in Afghanistan, we've got wars in Israel going on currently, we've got a war in Russia. So you find that throughout all of this, we've had economic meltdown in 2008, 2009, and yet there was a sustained effort to develop the team, the Springbok team that is, to develop the players, to make sure that there's a pool of players to be selected from. And you know, I can argue that at this point in time, if you look at the players of color, player for player, and you measure them against their opponents, you find that there is, color doesn't play a role in it. It's performance-based, too much so that the coach has developed a way of testing the impact of the players that's driven by data. So imagine that all of a sudden now in 2023 you have a player who is being selected on the basis of data that shows the impact he has on the team. I mean, you know, Workday would be going nuts to be able to say, please, can we do the data analysis for you? So you can see that Rassie has been a coach and in the coaching fraternity for 20 years. So over 20 years, you are able to develop the different data sets that you believe can indicate the performance, the measurement criteria, and so forth. So energy is something that oftentimes what happens is we are energized because of good news. You know, the dopamine is up, and so we're all excited. And then when the event is over, we forget about what it took to create the event. Look at tonight's event, and the energy in the room, and the buzz. So what it takes to create the event is actually what sustains the output, it sustains the performance, provided you have a mechanism of repeating it, so you can be able to compare. So in terms of sustaining energy, I think what we should do as South Africans is that we should mature into the phase where we say, if we look at the Springboks, and I mean it's topical now, but if you look at the Springboks can be criticized for a variety of reasons. This week, and throughout this World Cup, what we have seen is we have seen that the nation, the supporters decided to not look at what is wrong with the team, but rather focus on what is the team trying to achieve. Every coach that spoke, every player that spoke, they continuously remind us of what is their purpose. Their purpose is nation building. Their purpose is to inspire a nation. When Siya Kolisi takes the stand post-match, he talks about the 57 million, the 60 million, the 62 million South Africans that is behind the team. When a Cheslin Kobe talks, he talks about the wind beneath his wings, which is the South African fans, the nation. So we can take a leaf from the book of the Springboks to say, if we can, in our own little ecosystem, if we can start to say, let us mature beyond the mistakes, beyond the weaknesses, beyond the challenges, and ask ourselves, what are the underlying challenges that we can potentially rectify in order to build a more sustainable society, to build camaraderie. I think that will provide a space through which energy can be sustained. So that would be my thinking around sustaining the energy. In terms of nation building, Brand South Africa, I think whenever the Springboks play, your job is automatically half the job is done. So I can propose that we have a Springbok test match every weekend, you know. So it's one way of looking at it. But, you know, so we love what we do as Springboks. We love to go out and break our legs. We love to go out, get tackled. We love to take the bumps. And the reason why we love doing it is because we know how much it means for every person that is watching. We know how much it means for the school that we represent. We know how much it means for our families. So I think if us as the fans, if we can look at the team and say, the time has come for us to say thank you to the Springboks for what they are trying to achieve. And hopefully we can put our shoulders to the wheel and say, let's all rally behind this wagon and try and push the nation forward, basically. So in my mind, I think nation building requires citizens that are legitimately and honestly, openly thinking about the country as opposed to themselves first.
Thank you, Ashwin. That reminds me of the 1995 slogan, "One team, one country,"
Indeed.
right?
And I'm curious to understand, sort of from a leadership perspective within a Rugby World Cup squad, that the sort of dynamics between a game where one has to, the coach or the team, have to bring in perhaps a different game plan, perhaps a bit more experimentation to what they've done the week before, but at the same time manage that with the risk of failure, because obviously outside the pool games, if you lose, you're out the tournament. So I'd love to know a little bit about sort of the inner workings of how that leadership works in trying to instill the change, but at the same time trying to balance the risk of that.
Thank you very much for that question. So if we take DJ Black Coffee, who's arguably our most famous DJ, and we take Reddy D from Cape Town, who is, you know, also like a legendary DJ, and some neon lights, I think that's a way of innovation to take Rassie to the next level, you know, so he doesn't have to have just the orange lights and the yellow lights and the red lights. But I think to the question, one can see that Rassie has been living on the edge, the frontier of innovation. throughout his coaching career. When he was still at the Cheetahs many years ago, there was the lights that they used to have right on top of the stadium. And everybody was sort of like, what's he doing and where's that coming from? But the reality is, when you look at innovation, innovation is a process that leads to an outcome. Now, what's nice is if you look at, and I forget his name now, but he was or perhaps I think it's Sir Johnny, if I'm not mistaken, the Apple's head of innovation, or design, in fact. So he used to work with Steve Jobs, and I read up on this, and where at some point he was saying that he had a meeting with Steve Jobs every day in the engineering facility, or in a room where only they were designing the iPhone and every new version of the iPhone. So if you listen to how innovators talk about innovation and the role of innovation in product delivery of product, then what it shows is that there's a clear space for failure. Failure is part of the process of developing and designing. If you look at coaching, then in my experience as a player, what I have found was something that have helped me in my personal life as well, is when a coach and a manager is able to come and explain to you the process of what we are trying to achieve, get you as the individual to understand it and buy into it, and then get the team as a collective to unite behind that process. The outcome of that becomes secondary, and that's what I have seen has become the success of Rassie and Jacques. So a bit of background perhaps, just to bring context to the point. So Jacques Nienaber used to be my team physio when I moved to Joburg 20 years ago. So there was a team called the Cats before they went extinct. They're parked next to the dinosaurs. And it was made up of the Free State Cheetahs, the Lions, and some other teams. And so we were called the Cats 20 years ago, Dr. Nick. And Rassie was at the sunset of his career. And he then became a forward coach with the then head coach, Chester Williams, for the Cats. So the physio was Jacques Nienaber. Rassie was the forward coach in the late Chester, and him and Rassie was best friends, was then the head coach. Today you have Jacques Nienaber as the head coach and Rassie as the director of rugby for SA Rugby. So what you have is you have a 20-year, 2 decades, where they've been able to test processes. And I think what they have landed at is they have landed at a place where they can select a 7-1 split. So perhaps for those that are not technically up to it, so 7-1 basically mean that you only have one backline player on the bench as opposed to 6-2 or a 5-3 where there's forwards and backs. Now, in fact, to the point where the world was starting to question if it's legal for him to do it. So when those questions come, then you know that you're busy innovating. Because otherwise it's the same. But when they were asking those questions, it was then when I realized at which level Rassie is trying to innovate the game, let alone just the team being innovative as a team. So innovation, a lack of innovation gives you what we used to call stump car rugby. So stump car rugby is where you have the big forwards, it just takes the ball up and they just go in. The Bulls were sort of synonymous with stump car rugby due to the size of their forwards. At some point it was the main concern with us is the Springboks. Then the likes of Cheslin Kobe came, and they started changing the game. Smaller players, more versatile, quicker, skill level was higher, so you could play a different style of game. So when Rassie selected the 7-1 split against the All Blacks in August in London, it was interesting because if you had to sit and look at the team and then you realized that what he's done is he has, over a period of 7 years, he's been able to mold players into positions where he knows what is your key position and what are the other positions that you can cover. So in order to do that, again, what he's showing is you can transfer one skill from a position into another position without losing the effectiveness of the position, because you want to pick your best player at all times. And that's innovation. That's being able to show one player how to read the game from a different strategic vantage point on the field. Because you interpret the game very narrowly when you're a player on the field. So when you have a wider scope, you have to also interpret the game a whole lot more different. So if the coach can transfer that skill, it's a way of innovating that I don't think is well understood outside of the circles of the game. But the real innovation for me is the statistics, the data. Because for a long time, data was the purview of the postgraduate students. The undergrads, you come, you read. And in rugby, I mean, rugby players hardly get through matric, let alone postgraduate studies, Dr. Nick. And then when you do explain to us things, it has to be, take a lot of knocks against the head, so it has to really be A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Anything beyond the 3, we sort of like have to double clutch. So for me, it was the fact that we've reached a point in rugby, South African rugby, and England has been there before us. Sir Clive Woodward, albeit now he gave all his calls wrong. I mean, all his calls for the quarterfinals were wrong. Well, what do you expect of an Englishman? No. But so Sir Clive Woodward, in 2003, he was the coach of the English, and he had about, sure the correct number, but I think about 30 people on his management staff and 30 players. So he had this massive management staff, and that's when he started trying to take rugby to a level where there is managers that focus on specific line items. So it's players' nutrition, it's players' recovery. So everything was labeled and there was a manager for it. And so that the coach can really just manage all of the different managers, like in a corporate structure. We have reached a point now where we have a coach incumbent, we have a director of rugby incumbent that have used data over a decade and have been able to refine the data sets that the variables now is constructed in a way to give you a construct that's made up of information that really takes us a meter over the advantage line, as opposed to it's just a tackle. But he knows what is the data that gets you over the advantage line for a meter. A meter in rugby is what gave us a penalty and we scored the game when we dropped goal penalty. So what we have done over the past 20 years in rugby, we were able to take all the data and structure it in a way that now we can be informed by data in terms of team selection. And that, together with the creativity and then also just, the coach applying his logic on the day, I think what that does, it has taken our game to a whole new level. It has made the players way more marketable than what they've been before. And it has created an intellectual into the game of rugby that has not been there before. And that's all been enabled through technology. If you think about it, the different devices the players wear in their jerseys to track the meters they've made and the stats in the post-analysis. If you look at all of the commentary, the pundits, the data that they use. So to conclude on that question, I think where there used to be a case of anything in and anything out, and then we went to garbage in and garbage out, we are now at a place where we say we know what we put in and we know what to expect on the outside. And so the process becomes one where you don't have to wonder, you can trust it, and you can have faith in the coaching team. And then when you get to a point where the coach says to you, I'm taking you off after 30 minutes, like what is done to Mani Libbok, you don't have to make it a race issue. You can actually say, oh no, it's raining. We are playing a more of a defensive game. They haven't scored against us. And it's England. So when we play England, it's their weather. So good. Fine. Mani comes off. Pollard goes in. So you really can separate. And when that happens, you find that what we've seen over the weekend, every single screen in the entire nation were occupied by eyes glued to the screen. And that was because we all, I think, can start to feel that data is really at the center of transforming society into a society that believes in the competence of the individual and the team. And success becomes a process of that. So I think that's what data and innovation, creativity has really brought to the Springbok team in its dynamics.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nick. Ashwin, what inspirational words. Having been in a point where you carry you carry the weight of the country on your shoulders, right? And we look now, South Africans are carrying a lot. You're hearing people in corporate saying, I'm carrying this company, I'm crumbling. You're hearing private sector says, we're carrying this country, we are crumbling. You're hearing people in families saying, I'm carrying this family, I'm crumbling, I can't. What advice would you give around, there's something unique around the resilience of rugby players that we can tap into during these tough times that probably we all can learn from, that helps us to push and make sure that, you know, at that, after 70 minutes, we get those points in and we need the game. What advice would you share with South Africans?
Yo, Lizzie, I thought it was going to be a yes or no question, so I take it.
Ashwin, you lied to the nation.
Program director, I think if I can maybe just, you know, I'll try and keep it brief as best as I can. That's such an important question because rugby is fun. It's every player out there on the field, we're having fun. We really, it is our first love, it is our passion, and we are able to live that out. What happens with professional rugby is that we're living it, or we're trying to perform at the edge of our ability. So I can't run faster than what I'm running now. It's full tilt. And for that, it is Usain Bolt, I saw a quote where he said he trains for 4 years to be able to run 9 seconds. So let's talk about patience. And I think Rassie, again to paraphrase him, Sia has said so in his own way, Jacques has highlighted it as well, is they're trying to make South Africans understand that as rugby players, we know we are lucky. We're doing what we love. We're out there in the field for 80 minutes. Yes, we may break our necks, but I mean, what is it to break your neck versus having 13,000, 100,000 people whose livelihoods depends on your decision or your ability to execute on a strategic plan or objective. And so the coaching team, and I mean, isn't Sia just the most amazing captain? John Smith has said it himself. He said, if you look at him, and you look at Francois Pina, he said that he feels like Sia is just shoulders above in terms of what he's managed to do for society. And the message that comes from the Springboks is the following. They say pressure is what people are going through at home. You don't have running water. You struggle to send your kids to school. Unemployment is high. I saw an article earlier in the week that Cheslin Kobe, as one of his best friends, passed away. That's pressure. And I can only imagine what it must be like to be in the boardroom and having to deal with the pressures of the boardroom on a daily basis versus being a rugby player that trains on a Monday, trains on a Tuesday, off on a Wednesday, trains on a Thursday, maybe trains on a Friday, and then play on a Saturday. So it's a very different type of pressure, and I think if there's a message in it, I want to latch on to what the team have actually tried to convey to the nation, is to say, we understand how lucky we are as Springboks to be able to live our dream, carry the hopes of a nation. It's an enormous responsibility. But in the bigger scheme of things, we are trying to say to every South African, every chairman, every chief executive, every executive, middle manager, lower manager, every employee, every morning when you get up, you guys, in your own capacity, in your little world, is what inspires us to want to go into the field and say, if I don't give my all, I'm not worthy of wearing this jersey. Because there is 60 million South Africans who all wakes up, and then there's a core group of leadership in corporate that is on a daily basis trying to meet the targets, to meet the budgets, to manage the targets, to manage the budgets, to see how many more people they can employ, how many more graduates can go to school, how many people can get bursaries. So that level of pressure, societal pressure, I think the Springboks are here to say that we hope that on the weekend, when you go through that nail-biting last 2-3 minutes and you feel like the world can just stop here, you don't want to know what's going to happen beyond this, and when we all sit in anticipation, and Mani Libok, and maybe I should stand up as part of the closure to show it, he's got this thing most where he goes. You check that one, and then he goes, and Dr. Nick is now, he's got this slight move where he goes, and then like, does that one there. And I'm like, just kick the ball already. So I think what happens is that when we get the nation to that tipping point, that's when we say, that's where the magic happens. We want the nation to feel that we are in touch with the reality of the nation. So let us inspire each other to thrive in what we are doing, regardless of what is at stake. And what will guide you through that kick, what will guide you through the moment is the work that you've put in. And Andre Pollard, if I can conclude with this, he said it best when he said, they asked him, how did he feel to come and take that penalty? And he says, it is a process. Every day when we're in practice, you go and you do that and you go through the process. So when you get a nail-biting, game-changing, life-altering kick like that in the dying moments of the game, he's not concerned about getting the kick over. He realizes, deep breath, calm the nerves, relax, you're in the backyard, taking another practice kick, and go through the process. So my message then is to all of us as South Africans, wherever we find ourselves, let's believe in the process that we are going through, and the results is a consequence of a commitment to a process that's worth believing in and worth pursuing. Thank you.
TM Global Media, going beyond borders.